Welcome back to the Roughed Up Podcast.
I'm proud and baffled that Ryan and I are in a situation that we get to talk to Redcliffe legend, and not only Redcliffe legend, but an Australian legend. He is known around the world for his poems. We are honoured that we get to talk to this Australian hero. What many would call a hobby into his identity and his passion. I am proud to introduce Rupert McCall. How are you going, Rupert?
I'm great, Eli. Thanks for that amazing intro, mate.
Stumbled a little
Well,
bit.
it's roughed up, right? So
exactly.
we can be a bit rough in this conversation. I like it.
So what we're going to do today is just delve into your story, your life. Obviously, Redcliffe legend, and we're Redcliffe boys as well. So we just want to hear how you've gone through life, where you are today. They're definitely an inspirational man, has done a lot of things through your life. Definitely has a lot of stories, from one that I've heard about, climbing up a pole at the Gabba.
Oh, you've done your research.
Yeah, I've done my research. But yeah, we'll get into it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a long answer, mate, if you want the whole story. But let me just say that it started at Redcliffe.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not born at Reddy. I was born in the Southport Hospital on the Gold Coast, but pretty much from whenever I can remember, I was on the peninsula. And so that's where the story begins in a lot of ways, especially in terms of my poetry.
Yeah.
And where I, first, I guess, connected, with the spark.
Yeah.
That made me kind of feel that it was a pretty good way of telling a story.
Yeah.
So I was at school at Our Lady of Lourdes at Woody Point, which is now known as Southern Cross primary campus, in grade 5, and my teacher asked us, we had to do something for a parent-teacher night. We had to kind of put on an act,
Yeah, as you do.
So he was a great fan of poetry and Australian poetry.
Yeah.
So he passed the textbooks around and the bush verse, and we had to learn this poem, which I still know it because we had to learn it off by heart. I'm not going to recite the whole thing, but it just started on the outer Baku, where the churches are few and the men of religion are scanty, on a road never crossed except by folk who were lost. One Michael McGee had a shanty, and that was Banjo Patterson.
Yeah,
his poem of bush christening, 1980, grade 5.
That's where it all started.
That's where it all started. In that little classroom at Woody Point, and at the same time. Good for me that this happened. I call it like one of those beautiful random collisions in life, where two forces came together at about the same time. So as I was inspired by the storytelling and the poetry of Banjo Patterson in 1980, you guys weren't even born, so you won't remember, but you might know that something else happened in 1980, and that was the beginning of State of Origin Rugby League.
Oh, yeah.
Game one. Arthur Beetson, who came down from Roma to Redcliffe.
Yeah.
So we claimed him as a Reddy boy. Led the first Queensland team out of the tunnel at Lang Park. Yeah. We heard the roar from Redcliffe, my brothers and I. We were crowded around television, watching that game. So the collision that I referred to was this awakening, or this realisation about poetry and storytelling, and my other great passion in life, which was sport, and especially rugby league and cricket. And I played rugby union, and I've since become passionate about a lot of other sports. But for me, I didn't realise it then, but it lit a spark which was instrumental in paving the way for the sporting poet that I was destined to be.
Yeah, well, I've done some research on you, obviously, like I said before, and I could see when you were a bit younger, used to go down to the Dolphins and watch the Dolphins play a lot. And you're a big Dolphins fan, I can see by your hat.
Yeah, flying the fin, even though it's been a tough stretch the last few weeks.
Definitely.
But
Definitely tough stretch. But so like we'll get into like if you are happy to go, your family as a kid, family life as a kid. So I've got here your dad was a taxi driver.
Yeah, look, not in the early doors, but he certainly spent his fair share of time behind the wheel as a cabbie.
Yeah.
And I guess my father, he was a bit of a character. Like he loved telling a story.
Yeah.
There were times. Right. Exactly. It was his perfect profession.
Yeah.
He loved a joke, social company, and a gift of the gab, perhaps. That was my dad, and my mum was a great. They were both great supporters of, my poetical journey because it was a little bit against the grain when I decided to turn left at the crossroads, and we might get to that later. But Mum was she was from Bundaberg stock. Her father was a cane cutter from Bundy.
Oh wow!
That's probably why I like drinking now the product so much. And she moved to Brisbane with her family, first to Greenslopes and then met Dad, and eventually they set up shop on the cliff in Margate. That's where I grew up with my two brothers playing backyard footy and backyard cricket, and climbing through a hole in the fence, so I didn't have to pay for a ticket to get into Dolphin Oval every second Sunday. Yeah, found the hole every second Sunday. Sorry, President Bob Jones, if you're listening. And that was like religion for me. Yep. Going to watch the Dolphins play at Dolphin Oval. Every grade had my autograph book. We'd to earn money so that we could. Buy.
Who was your big inspiration from the Dolphins back then?
Good question. There were a few. There were some great names, I guess, that came into the mix. Superstars like Arthur Beetson and Mark Murray, John Rebo, Brian Niebling, Wally Fullerton-Smith, all played for Australia, and others. But my hero was a fullback by the name of Bunny Pearce. Okay. He played for Queensland pre-Origin, and he was just a real likeable footballer. Yeah,
just casual, like down to earth bloke.
Yeah. He was like everyone could kind of relate to him as a footy player because he wasn't brilliant, but he was reliable. Yeah, and he was a toe poker as well. And he's a good mate. He kicked plenty of goals. He kicked Queensland to a rare victory over New South Wales, actually. But he also was the one that stayed behind after the match and signed every autograph in the book. So just like he was there for his fans as well. He was Mr. Nice Guy, if you like, and there was nothing you could dislike about Bunny Pearce. So he and the other three that I remember were Peter Leese, Tony Obst, and Ian Tiney. They called those the three with Bunny with a holy trinity. And Ian Tiney was kind of just on the next line of betting. But they were great days. Yeah, good old days. What else have we got here? Oh, the Redcliffe show's coming up soon. As like a Redcliffe boy. Do you remember? Did you ever go to the show as a kid? I loved the bloody Redcliffe show. I know. And my mum mentioned it. Oh, really? This morning, I think, when we were in the car to go over and watch my young fella playing footy in the Confraternity Shield. And she said the Redcliffe show's just around the corner. Yeah, it's on this weekend. And I got really excited because I remembered how pumped I was. Yeah, always as a kid. The show, all the animals and... Well, it was kind of like, we would do whatever we could to earn some money. Before the Redcliffe show. I remember picking grapefruits off the tree in the backyard and going up to the fruit shop and selling probably for 5 cents a grapefruit, and worked in a burger stall at the Redcliffe show because my friend's mother ran it, I think to raise money for the Redcliffe Swimming Club. So we get in early and do our shift, get paid, and then just run amok in Sideshow Alley, you know, right in the bloody Gee Whizzer and the octopus, and it was bigger than Ben-Hur for a kid on the Redcliffe Peninsula.
Oh yeah. I think it still is. I think it's died down a little bit because I think like a lot of it is money now in it, but everyone was excited for the show as a kid, like. Big Redcliffe community thing that brings everyone together. Yeah,
the world has changed, I guess, in a lot of different ways. But that excitement that I remember for being a kid on the way to the Redcliffe show, I'll never, ever forget. And we also used to, have stuff at school like, you know, we'd sketch a picture or write a story and enter it in the competitions, like at the Redcliffe show. And, you know, there'd be first, second and third, the blue, the red and the green ribbon, ribbons, so I won a couple of gold medals there as well.
Of course you did. Well, talking about school, like, what was your school life like? Were you like a smart kid? Were you good at English because obviously your poems, and you were like later on a lawyer? Well, a solicitor or a lawyer?
Same diff, mate.
Same diff? Yeah, but obviously you got a lot of brains to you. Yeah. Were you good in school? Or?
Oh, well, it was good enough, I suppose, to get a TE score, which is what they called it then, to study law at QUT.
Yeah.
So the long story short, you know, I kind of passed my degree.
Yeah.
I was playing rugby for Brothers at the time, and I was a very diligent kind of studier, if you like.
Yeah.
Like I put in the yards, the hard yards.
Unlike me.
So, you know, that got me a fair way, but I just didn't really enjoy the work.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you look at law and then poetry. They're kind of like pull up creativity and then by the book. They're completely opposite when you look at it like that. So how do you go just not thinking about the creative side when you're doing all...
In the law, well, you try to kind of incorporate a bit of that creativity, I suppose, if you're... I guess in the act of winning an argument or persuading the judge. I didn't really get that far into it, you know, to fully realise my potential as a solicitor, but I did. It wasn't the thing for me.
Yeah.
And that other path seemed a whole lot more exciting. I just had to justify in my own mind that I could travel the other path, you know, that I could somehow make a living writing, reciting poems, you know, which a lot of people thought I was kidding myself.
Yeah, that transition must have been pretty difficult, going from like obviously a solicitor to a poet. And I don't know where you were at the time of like financial situations and stuff like that, but I think in any situation that would have been hard. Like, I think I've done some research. You were past your like 20s because in uni you did some poems for your mates' birthdays.
21st birthdays. Yeah, Chappie and Ash, my two best mates, and they were well received, those tributes, the 21st birthdays. But you know, I didn't think it'd lead to an international career. But it gave me a little bit of a spark. I'll kick along.
Yeah.
And you know, I won a competition on Triple M paying tribute to the Broncos.
Oh, nice.
In 1988, I think was their first year in, or 89, certainly late 80s. But basically, you know, through my degree, I was playing rugby, you know, alcohol becomes part of the equation, you know, girls, all of that. So it's a little bit of a time in your life where you're just trying to find some traction. And I passed my degree, got a job with a law firm in town. They sent me to Strathpine to be a solicitor out there, and it just, you know, it was a bit ugly at times. You know, there's lots of... In that era, there was family law and custody battles and domestic violence stuff, you know, and restraining orders. And I was just a kid. And that's fine. I mean, you know, there's got to be somebody to stand up for people in those situations. But I used to, you know, drive home just thinking, I I don't really like this.
The mental toll must have been.
Yeah, and if I had stayed, I probably might have found my way into some other area of law, but it just reached the crossroads in 1994. I'd been a solicitor for 6 months. Started writing some poetry. Actually, enough to put out a book at the end of 93, self-published, backyard job. But we can talk about that later.
This podcast.
Yeah, backyard job. Yeah. And here's one. Here's one for the fans, the many fans and supporters of Roughed Up. When I got to the crossroads, I basically asked myself what was going to be my best contribution to the world.
Yeah.
And what it looked like to me was not that path of a solicitor practicing family law. It was to continue, the great tradition in this country of storytelling and poetry and not just writing it but performing it, connecting with my audience. And so I listened to the voice that said, follow the path of your greatest passion.
Yeah.
No matter what. Don't worry about what society tells you. You've studied all those years. You've got to go down this track. So no, I turned left and took the road less travelled. Yeah. And that's the path that leads me to Sandgate this afternoon, talking to you blokes.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that must have been a struggle, eh? Like, I can't imagine being that long at university and just going, nah, I'm done with that, and just going, I'm going to try this out.
Well, I got to the end, so I didn't bail out halfway through.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was important at least to get my practicing certificate as a solicitor, so that if it didn't work out,
then you've got that to fall back on.
If it went south, I could come back to the law.
Not many people say that. Falling back on a law degree, far out.
Yeah, and it wasn't. So I was 23 years old. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a mortgage.
Yeah.
I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Like, that was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Stuff everybody else. I was rolling the dice and moving in that direction. But it was more of a struggle from my parents, and my grandmother, who paid my way through uni or helped pay it anyway. God bless. God bless Nana McCall. Yeah, she almost fell over. But as I said before, Mum and Dad supported that decision, even though they probably had a few question marks over it.
Definitely, yeah.
And here we are.
I bet they're
30 years later.
Yeah.
25 actually.
When did you realise that you were so good at talking? Because I'd love to do stand up at some point, and you were just so chill. From the moment I met you, you're just calm, just heart rate slow. You're just really.
Yeah, well, it wasn't always that way, Eli. You go through those early phases of being really nervous and uptight about taking a microphone or standing up on a stage.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you go through a process of convincing yourself that you're worthy.
Yeah.
That you are worthy, that you've got something to offer.
Yeah.
And that this audience, they're not there to eat you alive.
Yeah.
They want to be inspired.
Yeah.
Like, they want to soak it up. They want their heart to skip a beat. So if I've got the ability to do that, and I figured out that I have, well, that's what I try and give them. Yeah. It hasn't always been smooth, but don't worry. I was very nervous to start with, and I thought, maybe this is too tough. Maybe I'm not really cut out for it. But persistence and belief, and a little bit of perspective, which I got at Anzac Cove at Gallipoli. But that's a whole nother story, which we might get to later. If not, no worries. But yeah, mate, it's almost just understanding, as I said before, that my best contribution to the world is to be able to communicate my passions and my inspirations to a wider audience, like we're doing here this afternoon.
Yeah.
So just chill.
How did you know that people wanted to hear what you had to say? I feel like that's a big thing. Even with this, is why do people want to hear us talk? Why us? And how did you know that?
Have the people answered that one yet?
I guess not.
No, don't worry, they will. This is what it's all about. Just having a conversation, you know, on a Tuesday afternoon on a Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. I don't even know the day, but when I come down into this studio, man, I lost my bearings.
It was a bit of a dodgy setup. We'll get there.
Yeah, it's like you get just little hints and clues as you go, and you've got to cling on to the good stuff and forget the best you can the mistakes you make and the nightmares, the bad stuff. So that's a challenge, but that's just what you've got to do. You've got to cut that stuff loose and focus on the good. Yeah. And when I recited those poems at my mate's 21st birthdays, you know, highlighting the lives of you know, these two great friends of mine of 21 years, you know, bringing to the surface not just their good qualities, but the times they disgraced themselves, you know, on the drink and ended up nude. You know? Like, you know, it was the good, the bad, and the ugly, basically, in those poems. And not only was it well received by our peer group, so our mates, but also like the mothers, the parents, and the grandmothers, and the uncles and aunties. They were giving me a pat on the back and saying, "Oh, can I have a copy of that? I really want a copy of it." So I thought, it mustn't be too bad.
Yeah. So you just took the jump and it just worked out. Is it?
Took the jump. Yeah. Sometimes you've got to take that leap of faith. Yeah. Knowing that you think you've got something to offer. Yeah. And you don't really. You won't find out the answer to that 100% unless you take that jump. Yeah, unless you jump off the end of the Redcliffe jetty.
Like, you've got to believe that, like, a little bit of arrogance that you have whatever's in your head is worth saying, and you've thought about it in your head and you've replayed it over and over, and you know that people want, like, if you want to hear it, then hopefully someone else wants to hear it.
Correct, and that's the approach that you have to take, even though you know that. You know, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Yeah. There'll always be a percentage of people in any audience who probably don't care for it too much. Yeah. But again, as I said before, you've got to cut that loose. You just got to focus on the positive, you know, the smile in the audience that gives you a lift, that gives you a boost, and then just stay on the front foot.
That's it, just thinking about the happy things. Like, is that how you forget about all the hate, people not liking you? It's always thinking about the...
Well, yeah, you do your best. The haters still get under your skin a little bit at times, you know, and in this day and age, you're going to cop some criticism. You just have to accept that that's part of the ratio of life, and sometimes you have to listen to it. You know, sometimes you've got to be smart and say, oh, well, I can be better, but you can't let it tear you apart.
How do the poems go with the girls? You think about writing a poem to a girl, that's a sure thing. You know it's going to be...
Yeah, that's your toughest assignment. Yeah. I don't think my poetry to females went as well as my poetry to State of Origin players.
You know what to write about. You know a bit more about Origin.
Yeah, well, I suppose so. Girls are there. They're a harder opposition, I think. But I did find a good one in the end. Married a country girl from Augathella out in Western Queensland, and you know, on the night of our wedding at the reception, I had written nice. A few beautiful little verses for the occasion. Yeah. So, yeah, that's. I guess it's. Yeah, if you guys need a hand, like with your relationships, just see me after the podcast. Your first book,
I think you mentioned it just before, your Rhymes, Idols and Shenanigans was your first one in 1993.
Yeah.
How was the process of writing your first ever book and publishing it?
Well, it happened pretty quickly. I was still an article clerk. In town, actually, at Cranston McEachran & Co. in Brisbane. And early 93, probably late 92, was when I first started, I guess, penning odes to my heroes in sport. So after the 21sts, I got a gig as an MC at one of their brothers' weddings. And I kind of put it into verse, and again, it was well received. But that was like friends and family, so you never knew if they were just saying, giving you a pat on the back. Yeah. So I still had to prove myself, and I wrote an ode to Superimpose, my favourite racehorse, in 1992 after it won the Epsom Handicap in late 91. Sent it to 4TAB and it was read out on the radio. As I said, I did that Broncos thing in the late 80s, which got read out. So I'm thinking, I'm onto something. So early 93, I guess I was just in the zone. Like I was an article clerk, which meant that back in those days, you'd just do a lot of legwork around town. So you'd be filing documents in the different courts and serving summonses on other law firms, and so you just basically, and excuse the language, you were the shit kicker, like for the firm. And so I'll be sitting in the magistrate's court, you'd pull a number like you do at the bloody, the meat delicatessen, waiting to be called up, and they were, like, mobile phones just weren't as they are today, because I don't think they bloody existed. But so I was sitting there and I thought, what can I do? I started scratching out these poems, to Queensland State of Origin teams and to my heroes, Ian Healy and Dawn Fraser. And I wrote a poem called Queenslander in 1993. And unlike the current era, we were getting belted by New South Wales back then. Yeah. 92, 93, I reckon that was kind of Brad Fittler, Laurie Daly, Glenn Lazarus, Brad Clyde, perhaps. Let's just say they had a really good team, and Queensland were getting beaten up. So I wrote a poem, Beware the Wounded Queenslander. Beware his injured pride, ignore the allegation that his dominance has died. Beware his stinging battle scars. Beware his weary limp. You can disregard the rumour that portrays him as a wimp, for his mask of desperation is a devious disguise. Beneath it there's a fire, there is tiger in his eyes, for well does he remember what it is that makes him tick when Morona's wrapped around him and his body turns to brick.
Wow.
Right? So beware the wounded Queenslander as he battles for the crown. Never write him off, and he will never let you down. Now, there's more of a story in the middle that I left out, but I wrote that, and before an Origin game once, I faxed it to the QRL, Queensland Rugby League, and thought nothing else of it. And then the next week, Queensland won that game, by the way.
It was all you.
Yeah. Bobby Linder's swan song. And I picked up the magazine. See, we are talking like the old days when this is the way we, were reading articles in actual magazines. But Rugby League Week published Queenslander.
Oh, wow.
And I was going through it. Oh, this is great, I'm gonna get mentioned. And then the journo, Tony Durkin, says, the poem was found on the floor of the dressing shed.
Oh, wow.
It's thought that it was written by one of the players. So I got stitched up. Yeah.
Proper stitched.
Anyway, so I found the number of that journo and I rang Durko and I said, mate, come on, get your facts right. Yeah. And 2 weeks later, he published a story which the focus was around Rupert McCall, and this poem that I'd written for Queensland. And so I got on a roll, like with the odes that I was crafting in 1993, enough that together with a mate of mine who I went to law school with, Chris White, my first manager, and my only manager, by the way, he would get hold of the poems and I'd send them to him. He was in a law firm down the coast. He'd share them with other people. In that sense, it kind of went viral, but just amongst our networks, And so by the end of that year, I had enough to put into a book, Rhymes, Idles and Shenanigans, forward by H.G. Nelson from Roy and H.G. And a backyard job, we borrowed, we begged, we stole money just to scrape it together. We didn't steal, by the way, to get this book out. And it was published end of 93. We had a big big launch in town, and the rest is history. 6 months later, I retired as a solicitor.
Wow. Yeah, that's what did it.
Yeah.
So, how did you? You kind of went over that. How did your peers react? So then you went to the green and gold malaria, which became your kind of, would you say, where it went off even more?
Ryan, you are correct again.
And it's like, it became an iconic anthem for Australian sports fans. Could you tell us the creation of that and the experience of all that? Oh,
hang on to that mouse, mate. You just got a bit excited there. Well, that was an exciting time, actually. I published another book in between. That was Slops, Props and Goose Step Flavoured Lifesavers. Can't believe you missed that one, mate. So that was 12 months later, the end of 94. By that stage, I was out of the law, and I was I was making it up as I went, skating a little bit of thin ice, got some good gigs here and there, enough to keep the momentum in the sails, to float the boat, so to speak. We came out of that Christmas into 1995, and I was writing a regular column for the Courier Mail, and it was like every month, I think it was the feature poem of Rupert McCall. And so December of 94, I wrote an ode to backyard cricket, which was pretty popular. But then I cracked the jackpot. I was writing something for Australia Day. This is now 1995, 24 years old. I thought, I better write something that I guess pays tribute to the pride that I felt as an Australian growing up in this country.
Yeah.
And the opportunity that I guess it represented. And in a strange kind of way, I thought, what other country can solicitors retire and become poets?
Yeah.
Now, I think Australia has some pretty special qualities, and that sense of freedom and opportunity is what, like, we can, if we want, we can pretty much have a crack at whatever we like, right?
Yeah, podcast.
Yeah, this is living proof. It doesn't happen in every other country, believe me.
Yeah.
So people say, how long did it take to write Green and Gold Malaria, which is what I called it. And the actual physical act of writing it, pen on paper, was a few hours. It just flowed out of me onto the page. But it was pretty much my 24 years as an Australian on this planet.
Just your experiences.
Yeah, and it all funneled into that 3 to 4 minutes of Green and Gold Malaria. And it started, believe it or not, with, I guess, writing poetry is like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. You've got all these pieces. You just got to try and find a way to crack it open, get started, with the corners and the edges and the sides, and then dig into the heartbeat. And that poem started with a light bulb moment where I had this, I don't know, I might have had a few beers actually, where I realised, the Gulf of Carpentaria and Green and Gold Malaria.
Oh, wow.
Right? That's when you get excited. You think, that
sounds good, let's do it.
We got to work, like forward from there. And in actual fact, Ryan and Eli, I work backwards, because if you read the poem, that's almost like the twist or the punchline at the end. From the Great Australian Bight up to the Gulf of Carpentaria, the medical profession call it Green and Gold Malaria.
Yeah.
So I started with those two jigsaw pieces, and then I thought, I've got to, build a story around it. So I just worked backwards and thought, it's like when we feel this great Australian pride and we get that bit of a shiver down the neck, and your blood pumps, and sometimes when you see something so special that you're fighting back a tear. Yeah. I thought that's like the symptoms of a disease.
Of a disease, yeah.
So I'm going to the doctor describing these symptoms, and he's going, doesn't sound too good. But so I say, well, Doc, just give it to me. Tell me what it is. So when do you feel this way? You get these. So I say, I get it when I'm standing in an Anzac Day parade, and I get it when the anthem of my native land is played, and I get it when Meninga makes a Kiwi crunching run, and when Border grits his teeth to score a really gutsy ton. And now we're up and about.
Yeah.
We're into the heartbeat of the jigsaw of the poem, and it's like then the doctor, kind of assesses the situation and says, from the beaches here in Queensland to the sweeping shores of Broome, on the harbour banks of Sydney where the Waratah's in bloom, from Uluru at sunset to the mighty Tasman Sea, in the Adelaide cathedrals, at the roaring MCG, from the Great Australian Bight up to the Gulf of Carpentaria. The medical profession call it green and gold malaria. But forget about the textbook, son. The truth I shouldn't hide, the rash that you've contracted here. That's good old Aussie pride. I'm afraid that you were born with it. And one thing is for sure, you will die with it, young man, because there isn't any cure.
That's amazing.
So it was like, Ryan, I said, mate, I was in the zone.
Yeah.
I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah.
But when it hit the page...
You must have been just like, oh my God, what have I done? That's like so amazing. I couldn't imagine
So yeah, I still think that's the most important thing that I've written, because otherwise I might have had to go back to the law.
Go back to the law.
Because you must struggle, like when you've got like other poems that you have to write, like I know like you've done Roger Federer.
Yeah.
How was that one to do? Was it hard? Because it's not.
Yeah, it was challenging.
Yeah.
Eli, it's another one of my favourites.
Yeah.
Because I started out as a sporting poet, and I'd still have that reputation to a certain extent. But I mentioned those early poems, and then coming through the ranks, and now you get paid, you get commissioned.
Yeah.
To write a tribute to whoever it might be, the Cox Plate, or I'm just trying to think of others in recent times. I've done a lot of racing stuff recently, but through the years, there's been Shane Warne and Jonathan Thurston, Steve Irwin, not so much sport, but great Australian icons. And so when the Brisbane International, somehow conned Roger Federer to play in Brisbane. Yeah. They contacted me and asked if I would write something, a tribute to the Fed Express.
Yeah.
Wow. This is what it's going to cost you. Trying to,
busy that day.
Lay on the negotiations. No, I was trying, because the trouble was they spent all the money on him, getting him to the bloody tennis tournament, $1 million or wherever it was, and they said, we don't have much money, not much in the budget. Story of my life. So, paying tribute to Roger Federer, don't have much money. I thought about it for another 2 seconds and said yes. I don't care, whatever you got, just that'll do. But the tricky part of it was that was the first conversation. So that was my brief, basically, and I thought, cool. He's a pretty good tennis player, of course. And then they got back to me maybe a week later and said, we've also got Rod Laver. As part of the same dinner or event. Yeah. So can you just squeeze the Rocket in there as well?
Yeah. Just squeeze him in.
Which is fine, but then you've got two of arguably the greatest, well, not arguably, they are two of the greatest tennis players of all time. Arguably, they could be the best, although I think Djokovic has probably gone past them now. But at the time, and I'm thinking, how do I get them both in on equal terms, and kind of make it all blend into a story? Because that's the most important thing. You've got to take the audience on a journey. You've got to take them on a ride, and that's telling a story. So I had this really cool idea. It was like this make-believe tennis match, played up on a cloud in the sky. Yeah. Roger Federer v. Rod laver.
Yeah.
And so I dreamed up this classic 5-set battle that went to a tiebreak in the last between the Fed Express and the Rocket. Yeah. And I called it the Masterpiece because that would describe the tennis match.
Yeah.
And then I had the honour of standing up in that room and delivering it to those guys who were in the room, and Roger cried.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Look it up on YouTube, everybody, if you're listening. Rupert McCall TV, and it's called The Masterpiece. I think in all my YouTube stuff, it's definitely up there with the best production, so check it out. And it's also in my book, which we can mention later on.
Do you want to do this one, Eli? You can
take it away, Eli.
Yeah, come on, Eli. You need to get in
Sydney.
there. He needs his glasses.
Yeah, I can't read this.
The Sydney Olympics. You did the Sydney Olympics.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And how do you prepare for stuff like that in high pressure performances? Is there any rituals you do before you go up? To
stretch the hamstrings.
Yeah. Is there any rituals before you go?
Yeah, I guess there is. Sydney Olympics was massive time in this country. Well, I was 29 years old, had family by then. One child, my firstborn, Ella. So she was just born, and we packed up the car and the family and went down to Sydney, and I thought I'd write my Olympic diaries. I had a gig with a radio station at the time, and so the whole idea was that I was going to write on the run. So basically, as day one unfolded, I'd be penning an ode that I would recite the next morning on the radio, and then every day for 16 days.
That must have been a lot of pressure.
Big pressure, yeah. My favourite poem was day two. No, day three, actually. I stand corrected because day one was just, I don't know, there was lots happening, especially in the pool. We won our first gold medal, Ian Thorpe, in the 400, and then we came out and won the relay, which was just an amazing race against the Americans, and the 4x100, and we smashed them like guitars, which was kind of part of the folklore at the time. I won't go into the detail. And then, so that poem was all right. And then day two was Michael Diamond was a shooter, and he won a gold medal in shooting. And we're back at the pub, it's the only time in your life, Olympics, is when you're watching stuff like shooting, and archery, or sports where every time they hit the target, the roar goes up from the pub, you have a little drink. And anyway, Michael Diamond won a gold medal in shooting. So that was my poem for day two. And just when I thought it was going to be easy, day three came along. And I hope I can remember this. It's only a short one. The Olympic Games, this is a true story, boys, by the way. The Olympic Games hold many challenges, and those competing know it. But forget about the athletes. What about the poet? What rhymes with Van den Hoogenband? Not too bloody much. Please don't get me wrong. I got nothing against the Dutch, but why can't they give us swimmers like O'Neill and Dunn and Klim words that rhyme so nicely with unreal, young son? Top swim. Well, in the end, young Van den Hoogenband prevailed by half a metre, and his record time deserved to rhyme. So congratulations, Peter. That was his first name. What had me more concerned about the problems I was nestling was he hadn't even started with the Greco-Roman wrestling. When Owen Nazarian took on Yuri Melnichenko, the only chance a poet had was Marina Longnovenko, and she's a Russian pistol ace. No wonder I was stressed. That pentathlete Zadneprovskas was a nightmare name at best, because like the Polish sailor Kuznowicz, who was tricky on the tongue like tennis's Kafelnikov and baseball's Chung Soo Kung. There was nay Sinema Noglu on the snatch and clean and jerk, as far as something rhyming there. I'm glad the man's a Turk. But above poetic struggle, right, with absurd pronunciations, the Olympic Games, it's all about a unity of nations. That's what makes it memorable. That's what chills our bones. The Mockanoos, together with the Johnsons and the Jones. That's the sacred stage on which the best have always fought. And that, my friends, is why poetry is not an Olympic sport.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That would have been very difficult.
yeah, it went down really well actually on the radio the next morning, and now we get set for the next Olympics in Brisbane in a decade's time.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that as well.
With the Olympics, obviously Tokyo was during like COVID, and that was like a big thing. Like, how did COVID affect like your writing and like what you did, and like obviously public events and stuff like that?
Yeah, green and gold malaria was a good disease. Or ailment. COVID wasn't.
No, COVID.
Not for me. Not for anyone.
Not for anyone.
I wouldn't say, except maybe, people who made lots of money.
Crypto.
Yeah.
Those crypto guys, they made some money.
In different areas. But yeah, I was flying. I had a whole lot of high profile gigs lined up. I'd just spoken at the launch of Port Adelaide's 150th AFL season, which was a massive gig for me. I remember, and I had just a lot of events scheduled, and I was looking forward to it. And I remember my second child, my first son, Jake, was going for a driving test at Castledine there at the Department of Transport. So I was sitting in the cafe having a coffee, and COVID had started. Like, everybody was talking about it, and you thought, oh well, will it? Yeah. But it wasn't quite that stage. Like, it was like, oh, what's going to happen here? Yeah. Will it be just a drop in the ocean, or probably that wasn't the best metaphor, but will it pass quickly, or is it serious? Is it here to stay? I was emceeing the Liquor Legends conference the following Wednesday, and the guy rang me up and said, Rup, just letting you know, I know there's a lot of stuff happening with this COVID, but we're going ahead. It's the show must go on, all systems go. Cool. Hung up. 5 minutes later, same guy rings up, mate, it's all off. It's all over, Red Rover. and that was the point. That was it. Like, that was the I guess the hinge where things went south, and I got a lot of calls like that second one. Thereafter, I was just like dominoes falling down one after the other, gigs out of my diary and into oblivion. Yeah. So that's I wasn't the only one, so I figured out pretty quickly that there was no point complaining. You just had to improvise, stay positive, and find a way to connect with my audience just from a different angle.
The world definitely changed a lot over COVID.
Well, you guys probably wouldn't be doing this podcast.
No. You're right.
If it wasn't for COVID, and you might, you could have been also, but this medium became really popular.
Yeah, definitely did. Like, a lot of people started like through COVID, and like a lot of social media and Zoom and
live streams and all of that kind of stuff. So I guess it wasn't great, but we did learn some positive things from it, and they're the things that we carry forward. Yeah.
How did social media itself impact your writing, or how you get across to your viewers and stuff like that?
Well, it's been good for me. Yeah. It still is. Once upon a time when I first started, when you're self-published, you had to distribute books into bookstores yourself, because you didn't have a book publisher. You had to promote it yourself, like by trying to get a radio interview or stand.
That's it.
Go to bookshops, or stand on the corner and hold up your book, and that was a disaster sometimes. But social media and the net, you can have your own website, you can create your own bookstore, you can do your own promotion, you can record a recital, get it out there to the masses.
Yeah.
Come on a podcast.
Yeah. So I'm going to give my book a plug at the end of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely go.
And I'm sure, the sales are just going to come flowing in.
Definitely. But Eli's big into his ebooks. You're into the
I love my ebooks. I got your ebook.
Oh,
I
cool.
started listening to that. Yeah, no, it's pretty good. It's awesome how you can just start doing that. Was it a process getting it up on all those platforms?
Well, I did that during COVID.
Yeah.
That was one thing I could do.
Yeah.
Convert the traditional book into an audio book. So, I guess over the years I've worked in the media and television and radio and whatnot. So I had a couple of contacts in the game.
Yeah.
Just went into the studio and, I told a bit of a story about each poem, which is in the book as well, but it probably works a little bit better in audio format because when you're telling your story, you're expressing it. When you're reciting your poems, you're adding that extra dimension, that brings the words to life.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it was a good learning curve. And I'm pretty happy with the end product. I haven't sold too many audio books because, you got to compete with all the big guns out there in the deep end of the pool. But I'm happy with the product the book Golden Soil, it still sells at functions I speak at, through the different promos and posts that I put on social media. Yeah. And just through things like this, so it's cool.
Yeah. What else have we got? We can go.
You got so much there, lads.
I don't know. We can push on. Where do we want to go?
Well, we got to the Olympics, which was, what's that? 24 years ago now.
Yeah. How did your creativity go? Every day you had to write a new poem through that Olympics. Was it a struggle at some point trying to get something, or was it because it was just there?
Well,
you were just looking at it.
I think this we can speak about this not just in terms of the Olympics, but in general. Yeah, it doesn't always flow. Sometimes you hit the dead end. The speed bump. The writer's block, where it drives you crazy. So it's like anything, you choose to do it. A lot of it's good fun. Some of it's hard work.
Yeah.
You just got to persist. Have strategies to get past those roadblocks or mental kind of hiccups. And I often find if I'm stuck and I'm in a rut creatively, I'll go for a run, or go and kick the footy, or just get outside and do something different, and then come back to it, and you kind of have a fresh angle. Didn't have that opportunity, writing day to day, but then it's like, okay, well, you got a deadline. You got to meet it. It's like, handing in a law exam back in the day. Always backed myself to meet that deadline. So if you said, oh, could you write a poem, for my dog, and I need it by, Friday afternoon. So give me some info on that dog. What was his name?
Kelly.
Kelly, yeah. So give me a little player profile on Kelly, which is Eli's dog, by the way, folks. And I'll get it done. Yeah. One way or another, I back myself to do the job.
That's it. That's
awesome. Well, we've got another question here. I'll go. What's your what iconic event would you love to be invited to? Like something on your bucket list that you would love to write a poem about, and
Well, I would love to. I've been to one, but I would love to.
The question's a bit confusing on the screen.
No, it's cool. I was going to say the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl,
NFL Super Bowl. I've been to one, which was fantastic. But imagine having the opportunity, to present a 60-second piece at an event like that.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, well, geez, you're dreaming. How would you ever end up there?" Well, anything and everything's possible. You never ever say that it could never happen. I recited at Ground Zero in New York for the New York Fire Department on September the 11th, you know, in 2009. So I never would have thought that was possible, you know, when I first started out. So I guess, you know, in terms of sporting events, you know, that'd be right up there. Yeah. I have performed before State of Origin games before, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm loving the cricket at the moment, especially since we beat the Poms in the first Ashes test. But, you know, Lords, I've actually recited at Lords, amongst a touring group that we had going over there. And so, you know, I've ticked a few boxes, but, you know, whatever you've done, it's not as important about what you still have to do and what you still are able to do. And I still believe that I haven't fulfilled my potential yet.
Well, hopefully one day we'll see you at the Super Bowl. That'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome. You can get us some tickets.
That would be sick.
Well, we're talking about Origin. What do you think this year's Origin? We're up to finish game 2.
Yeah, I think it's great because we've won the series.
Yeah.
I wrote a poem last year for the team. That was commissioned by the QRL, but Billy Slater was a little bit behind it because I think he appreciates poetry. Yeah. Both his father and his uncle were creative types, like poetry and songwriting. So there's a bit of a scoop for you. But I spoke to Billy and Tani White, who's coaching the women's team, and they gave me the qualities, or at least I say it again, the jigsaw pieces. So this is our theme. I came up with Blood and Bone Maroon. Yeah. Recited to the players before game 1 last year. Yeah.
Got them hyped up.
They've been going well since then. Yeah. So I loved it. I loved this last game and game 1 when we kind of like had to dig deep and look into the eye of adversity and prove that, you know, we've got character and that's, you know, where it comes from, that we really do, you know, fight hard for the people in this state. When those players put on that jersey, you know, they are required to do their duty for Queensland. And that was instilled originally by the godfather of State of Origin, who I've also paid tribute to, a bloke by the name of Dick Tosser Turner, who lived about 60 seconds from where we're sitting here. Wow. Just up on the hill at Shorncliffe.
Wow. I had something in my head, but it totally went away. That's fine.
No, come back to it if you think of it. This is roughed up, by the way, folks. Yeah.
Totally.
Tell your friends about this podcast because it's going to be big.
It's going to be massive. Come on, Eli, you need to get into it.
I know. Well,
you can't read.
Well, what's the best? There's a question down the bottom. It's what's the best poem you've done live? Best speech you've done live? You've done a lot, but if you can narrow one down, what's the best one?
Well, there's a few contenders. And the masterpiece I've already mentioned. I was pretty happy with my recital at Ground Zero as well. Yeah.
That would have been a tough subject.
Yeah, it was emotional, to say the least. And that's on my YouTube channel as well. It's called A Firefighter's Dream. And the tough part about that, so let me nominate that one, I guess, for now, was that not only was it a really challenging subject, I was delivering it to American firefighters. Yeah. So you don't have any head start there. They don't have a clue who you are. Yeah. The way it came about was a bunch of Aussie firefighters were going over to do a charity run in America with their American counterparts, and so they asked if I'd write something for their adventure or their event, I guess, in 9/11. So I wrote a piece which I recited to them. They recorded it and they took it with them, and before they started the run, they played it to the Americans in LA and the Australian consulate, and the captain of Rescue 2, which is kind of like the most revered fire station in New York, and it's in Brooklyn. All the bad fires happen around there.
Yeah.
Their captain, Liam Flaherty, rang me up. I was on the way home from a funeral in Ipswich and asked if I would fly to America to recite it on September the 11th, which was a month out at that stage. So anyway, long story short, I wrote it. They liked it. I got there. I was to recite it in the morning. They were going to arrive at Battery Park, which was kind of right in the hit zone of September 11, at 8:46 a.m., which was when the first plane hit.
Yeah.
It was kind of all symbolic, I guess, and I did that well enough and got good accolades, etc. Anyway, this American guy was in tears. He comes and says, "Oh man, that was so good," and and he asked for a copy of the poem. I gave him the poem, and then I realised later on that I had no access to a printer, and I had to recite it that night at Ground Zero, which was the big one, the Twilight.
So you had to do it off
by heart.
Wow.
No notes, and we'd been to the pub in between. So and when you watch that on YouTube, that look of terror in my eye is for the fact that I have no safety net. I'd better nail it, or else. That added an extra degree of difficulty, and there's been other contenders, but I'll nominate that.
Yeah, wow. And obviously in your poems as well, we'll get on to another question, is like you talk about like the Australian landscape a lot, and like just Australia as it is. Where's your favourite spot in Australia? Is it Redcliffe? Is it anywhere else in Australia? Where's your spot that when you think of Australia, it's there?
Well, Redcliffe's my home, and I love going down to the beach near Scott's Point on a day like this, when the water's just like a mirror.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of fishing as a kid.
Yeah.
Moreton Island wrecked it for us with no surf, so we had to go fishing instead. Same on this side of the bridge. So that's pretty special. Maybe I'll throw in my top three. I do a lot of writing and thinking, sometimes drinking on my front deck at Paddington, just looking out over the suburb, and that's a good place for me. And the magpies sit up on an antenna across the street and sing every morning. Play some tunes, and I love sitting out there, soaking life up. And the other is out at Augathella, which is where my wife's from.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to meet her in the city. She boarded at a school in town, and she said, "Oh, she's from Augathella." I said, "Where the hell's Augathella?"
Middle of nowhere.
Well, if you started driving now, it's about 9 hours west.
Oh, wow,
out past Roma towards Charleville, and when I got out there and the horizon opened up 360 degrees, and I walked into the pub, and nobody cared who you were or what you did last week. It was only all about just living in the moment.
Yeah.
And at that stage, you couldn't get phone reception, so everything was just so simple, and I guess inspiring in that way, that I was blessed, to have met a girl from the outback. So Redcliffe, my home. Paddington, where I live these days.
Yeah.
You can hear the roar of Suncorp Stadium from that front deck.
Yeah.
And then out at Augathella, the home of the meat ants.
The home of the meat ants.
Yeah.
Wow.
After meeting, how long did it take for you to say that you're a poet, or was it like the first thing in the first day of meeting her, you were like, "I'm a poet"? How does that come about?
Yeah, well, she thought I was an idiot, actually. To start with. I had a reputation, like I'd done some poetry when I first met her, and so I'm going to let the roughed up world in on a secret here, if they didn't already know, that Rupert is not my real name. Like it's my nickname. I got it at school, and I'm not going to tell you my real name just to keep the suspense there. When I met Kate, it was the day or the night that we won our first Sheffield Shield in cricket, which was historic, And I'd been on the hill for 5 days drunk, singing songs and climbing poles, leading the choir and the war cries, and so she kind of knew that idiot was up there doing all that. And then when I met her in the Cricketers Club, I introduced myself as my real name, and she thought I was trying to like pull a Swiftie on her, like some kind of trick or so. It didn't start well, but then and here's another. I don't want to drop names, but I had to wait. I had to be patient. And first date, a couple of years later, because it took some time. She had a boyfriend when I first met her. So anyway, I was still keeping an eye on her. And sometime later, I went from a wedding reception to, it was an Irish pub called Dooley's in the Valley. And that's where Pete Murray, if you know the music of Pete Murray, he started off playing covers. And every time Pete and I played rugby together, we were mates. And so most nights he'd get me up to sing a song with him. And we do I Was Only 19 by Red Gum, which is a great song. And so I get to Dooley's and I'm talking to my future wife, just trying to impress her, and she's saying, "Oh yeah, you're just a big note, you're always in the limelight." It says, and I'm going, "No, I'm not. I'm not really like I don't like the limelight. I'm actually really shy." And just at that stage, Pete Murray at the front of the room says, "Oh, and Rupert McCall to come up here, like sing this song with me." And the joint was pumping, and I'm trying to wave it away, saying, "No, Pete, no, I'm almost across the line here." But I went up and sang the song, and we managed to survive that as well. And I think we had our first date at McDonald's later on that evening. Nice. So there you go. There's hope for all of us.
I found your little band that you did with. I have it written down somewhere.
Rupert's in the something.
What is it?
You had a song named Anzac. I had it somewhere.
Oh, Roffy and Rupert.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. So who went first there? Roffy and Rupert, I think.
Yeah. I think that was. Yeah.
So that was a project I did with a guy who came out of the woodwork and had started putting my poetry to song and music.
Yeah.
And we collaborated. Jake Roff was his name. Actually, the older brother of Joe Roff, who played many tests for the Wallabies, won a World Cup, and just about everything else in the sport. But his brother Jake was a muso, and again, the long story short, we collaborated and put out an album. We had this kind of idea that we combine rock and poetry and call it rocketry. And so I was a bit of spoken word, Roffy on acoustic guitar, and I kind of inspired by Red Gum, who wrote I Was Only 19, and Paul Kelly, artists like that. But unfortunately, the sad twist to that tale is that after we launched our first album, it must have been 2015-ish. Roffy was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and he was gone within 12 months.
Wow, that's so quick.
That's one of the, I guess, more emotional chapters of tragedy in my life, because I feel like we're onto something. And it still might happen, with the music and a muso in the future. But God bless Roffy.
So we'll try and... We've been recording for an hour 10. We'll try and not take up all your time. So we'll quickly go through all your work that you've done for the Anzacs. And a lot of your work is to do with the Anzacs and Anzac Cove. You were mentioned before.
Yeah.
And we see you... I've seen you down Anzac Square before, which is the local Redcliffe Memorial Place, and like your work with the Anzacs.
Yeah, I try to keep that sacred in my calendar. Dawn service at the Redcliffe Anzac Day, March every year. Massive crowds turn up now, don't they?
Yeah. Oh.
And it just, I guess it's
Always
where
rains. Always rains.
Well, it has the last 2 years. We were on a roll for a while, but the last 2 years have been ordinary.
Yeah.
But that's where my grandfather, my father's father, was a rat of Tobruk in World War II. So, he was responsible for setting us up on the Redcliffe Peninsula, Barney McCall, and we went down to the dawn service when we were kids, to clap him and his mates walking down the street. And so when I got the gig, or they asked me, I was very honoured, and it's gone so well they keep asking me back. So it's pretty special to me.
Yeah.
And yes, reciting in Anzac Cove. So I was going to tell you before about, rituals that you go through before you take a big stage. So for me, that year I spoke, there was the 90th anniversary in 2005. It was massive. Like, there were 15 to 20,000 people there, and a bit like 9/11, a bit like Roger Federer. You just you can't stuff it up. You have to. You better get it right, because you're not going to get a second crack. Yeah. So I was so nervous, before I got up. It was freezing cold. I was turning purple. My teeth were chattering, and then someone offered me their scarf, and I tried to say yes, and I just froze. I was in strife, right? I thought, wow, if I muck this up, that's it. I'm going back to the law. And it wasn't funny. I had my grandfather's his ID tags from World War II in my hand, and I reckon he died at that stage, and I reckon it was Barney. He gave me that little breath of inspiration, and not just inspiration, but perspective. Yeah. So I had this thought all of a sudden that said, 90 years to the very moment, on this same patch of sand, there were young Australian kids who are my boy's age now, jumping into the water, just trying to get to the beach, if they made it, find shelter, survive, whilst being shot at every angle, and all I had to do was recite a poem. So I had this great, it was like an intervention of perspective, and when I got up there, it was almost like I was in automatic pilot. Yeah. It's like everything I'd done up until that point, I was training for this moment. Yeah. And it was a blur, but I kind of nailed it, Yeah. I I felt the warmth from my grandfather, and again, got the job done. Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a crazy moment.
That would have been insane.
So you've obviously met a lot of people. We talked about that. What else have we got? Oh, have you ever had imposter syndrome? So you've had these big moments. Have you ever felt imposter syndrome in these moments?
What, like me feeling I didn't belong there, or how did I get there? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, like early doors, I remember I just started, and they asked me to present at Brisbane City Hall. So I was just a kid, and two of my heroes in life, amongst others, were Alan Border and Nick Farr-Jones, who'd captained the Wallabies to a Rugby World Cup win in 91. And I'd written poems to both of them, so that's why I was there. They wanted me. So I'm sitting at the table with AB on one side and Nick Farr-Jones on the other, and I thought, what the hell am I doing here? really? Like, these guys were
Big names.
wearing capes. Like, they were superheroes.
Yeah.
But then I realised they got served the same meal as I did, and they were eating the same food off the same plate.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe I belong a little bit, just a little bit, you know. Yeah, and we took it from there. But yeah, I mean, you know, the other moment was residing at a corporate tennis function in America, in California, and realising that Bill Gates was in the audience.
Yeah.
It's a big.
So after I finished and I did all right, like Andre Agassi was a great tennis player. He came and give me a hug, and then Bill Gates was tapping me on the shoulder, asking me about my memory process and what I did to prepare myself for big presentations like that. So that was a spin out.
Yeah.
Looking back at your career, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned about like growing up, starting, and just being a nobody and coming up? Now you.
Well, it may be going over ground that we have already covered in some way, but trust your gut.
Yeah.
Listen to that voice, you know, the voice that says that anything and everything is possible. You know, if you are good at something, if you are passionate about something, follow that path. You know, that's you gotta weigh things up, you know, and you gotta say, well, I want to live most of my life like with a smile on my face. I want to do something I enjoy. I don't want to resent or regret, you know, that I took the track that society said I was supposed to take, or that other people pressured me to take, which wasn't the path that I was supposed to take. I'm blessed that I live in a country where those opportunities are available, and there's no way that you can make that decision. You know, trust your gut, roll the dice, turn left, take the road less travelled. There's no way you can make that decision without it being a roller coaster ride.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You will make mistakes. You will take tumbles. You'll have to pick yourself up and keep moving forward. But you do that because you believe in yourself, you know, and what you have to offer the world. So, you know, it's not all rainbows and roses. Sometimes you have to deal with adversity. But at the heart and soul of the matter, you've got to be true to yourself, you know, and just to be the best version of yourself that you can be. I think that's a pretty good box to tick.
Yeah, that's definitely inspirational for, like, especially people our age and like people that like watch us.
Just think about all the mistakes we've made in this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And there haven't been too many. You guys have been awesome. I'm only joking, but like life's about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right. So just accept that that's the case. And you know, keep your focus, you know, somewhere down the track where the sun's shining and there's a smile on your face, and keep moving towards it.
So the last thing that we're going to do, because we've basically gone over all these points before, but the last point that we're going to do is, I don't know if Eli did it, but he said he was going to write a poem.
Oh, no, I didn't do it.
Oh, he can edit this in later.
And if my phone, my dad, when he was younger, he was really close with his grandfather. Oh, there goes the mouse yet again. He was really close with his grandfather, and when his grandfather passed away, he wrote a poem for him. And my dad asked if you could, like, review his poem and see if there was any way he could improve it and stuff. It was I'm pretty sure he recited it at his funeral.
You gonna recite it, or?
I can, yeah.
Why don't you? And then I'll take it in. I'll listen to it, and you know, I'm not going to be too tough on it. I think when it's coming from the heart, you know, that's the best place for it. So
he used to, for a bit of background, he used to bring into the Echo every year, and that was their like thing that they did. They went to the Echo every year.
Wow, that was exciting for me as well. Yeah.
So the name of the poem is Grandpa the Show and I. Every year since I was 2, the RNA would call us too. Pa knew the grounds from A to Z, and every pavilion we would thread. We would push through the crowds in Sideshow Alley, so to win a prize for my sister Allie. We looked at the cows, the bulls and the dogs, and sat at the wood chopping eating chips and hot dogs. We would buy show bags until we ran out of hands and stay late at night to hear the big bangs. By the time we got thrown out of the gates, I was exhausted, but Pa was great. I will miss these years without you, Pa, but I know that you will not be far.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, like, you can just tell, I didn't know him, but you can just tell the relationship that they...
It paints a picture, right? You know, and the best storytellers actually paint pictures, and the best artists, best painters tell a story, you know, with what they paint. It's close to my upbringing as well. You know, I can relate to a lot of the lines in that verse, and so it's special. You know, it preserves something magic about a grandson and his grandfather, and their annual ritual of going to the Eka, you know, of carrying as many sample bags as they could to the fireworks, you know, late at night, and the wood shop in between. I mean, I love that stuff. Yeah. So
it's relatable to like a lot of Australians, like everyone, like and just the relationship that you have with the people that you go with, and I think he's captured it pretty well.
Yeah, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. The last question is, what's your future? Like, what have you got to?
Oh, I'm going home to have tea with my mum tonight. At Redcliffe.
But what's the future for Rupert McCall? Like, what have you got happening? Projects?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you know, there's always a project on the go. Like way down the track, I'd like to think that I've earned the right to be the poet laureate of the Brisbane Olympics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know it's 9 years away or whatever, and hopefully, you know, we won't take it for granted. Hopefully we'll still be kicking, but
the game's going to look nice and shiny.
Yeah, you know, that's exciting. You know, closer to home, I'd love to be reciting a poem about the Dolphins' first grand final victory in the NRL. I mean, it won't be this year, and it probably won't be next year, but at some stage, you know.
With the hammer there, it'll happen.
how good is he playing?
He's very good.
He's just gone to another level this season, so he'll definitely get a mention. And in closer to this year, I'm heading over to the Rugby World Cup in France in September and October to follow the Wallabies and do a few other things, you know, leading a tour. So I guess, you know, that's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to that. But in a general sense, as I mentioned earlier, I still think that I've got some good stuff left in me. Yeah. You know, there's the dance isn't over just yet. And my kids, we've 3 finished school, 1 still at school in year 11. When Lockie gets through at the end of next year, it'll just take a little bit of pressure off, you know, paying the bills and the school fees and all that kind of thing. And I'll be able to kind of reconnect with the poetry that not that I'm commissioned to write, you know, by a corporate entity, you know, for dollars, because you know everyone's got to
pay bills.
Get food on the table. It might be more of a reconnection with the stuff that's really burning, you know, inside my heart and soul.
Yeah, well, that's good. Your book, do you want to flash your book around?
Yeah, this is the time where I say Golden Soil is available in all good bookstores.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not actually. It's not in the bookstores. It's in one bookstore, and that's my website. It's my greatest hits album. I went through just before COVID, luckily enough, and between 1992 and 2019 decided, you know, what my best poems were, and I put it into this book called Golden Soil, which has also become an audio book. Thanks, Eli. Thanks for buying that one, mate, during COVID. But my website is pretty easy to remember. It's just www.rupertmccall.com.au.
It's easy.
Awesome.
So do yourself a favour, folks. I think what's coming up? Father's Day? Yeah.
Also, we were talking about the whole thing, the Gabba poll. It was actually a comment because I asked the community page, any questions for you? First one, do you remember climbing the pole at the Gabba?
Yeah, I do remember. I remember that it was probably not the smartest thing to do.
It was raining, supposedly?
Yeah, actually, there's a photo in this book. There's a few photos in this anthology. So have a look at that, lads.
Yeah.
It's a bit grainy, but...
Right at the top.
Oh, at the top, yeah. It was a ridiculous move. And
to chuck that off there on the green screen.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was about early 90s. Again, nobody knew who Rupert McCall was. I was... just a bit of a lair, I suppose, which I thought, I wanted a stage to... the cricket was getting boring, so I thought, I'd tell the crowd a story or a poem, and I got up onto the electricity box, which is kind of the bottom of the pole, and the hill was wild. There were wild animals on that thing, and they just started throwing stuff at me, which is what you'd expect if you're going to stand up like that. So cans, sandwiches, a piece of watermelon, a fold up chair went past me at one point, and I'm thinking, well, I've either... And I had my name on my back of my T-shirt from a pub crawl that I'd been on. And I go, Rupert's a wanker. So, that's a term of endearment on the hill. I thought, I'm going to get down and swallow my pride or go all the way to the top.
Went all the way to the top?
I went all the way to the top, and that was my first arrest.
That's funny as.
But there's the proof in Golden Soil, because somebody happened to be there with an old-fashioned Kodak camera to snap it. Because again, if it was today's age, there'd be a million photos of it.
TikToks of you.
I could have been really famous.
Yeah,
but I'm lucky to be alive, basically.
But that will wrap it up. Final question: what's the meaning of life? Like, what do you think? Like the meaning of life is? What do you live life like?
You can't ask me that at the end.
You're a wise man.
Well, I mean, I've done my best over the years to be true to myself, and as you travel that journey, it doesn't always work out. I've spoken about that roller coaster ride, but as long as you know who you are and you know where you're going, and even if you don't know where you're going, but it's in the right direction, sometimes you just got to put one foot in front of the other and get there. So the meaning of life, I think, is getting to that destination and not having too many regrets about the path that you've travelled. And you will make mistakes, and you will take tumbles, but if you actually know who you are and you trust in yourself and you keep moving in that direction, then I call that a success.
Yeah.
And as I walk forward from this moment in the journey, it's going to be in this roughed up T-shirt. So thanks for that, guys.
All good. And the biggest regret of all is coming on the podcast. No, but thank you for coming, and thank you for watching. Definitely check out Rupert's website and get his book.
Yep.
Yeah, boys, I'll see you at the Redcliffe show.
Oh, definitely. Enjoy your dinner with your mum.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Easy. See you
guys.